I'm going to ask you all a question, and I need you to answer me honestly. Who here is human? I'd like to say a safe majority of you guys are indeed human. So from that, I'd like to ask you another question. Who here is perfect? It's okay to be confident. We as humans are, as much as we don't like to admit it, are inherently flawed. We have a tendency to judge one another quickly, creating these personas for each other in our heads. These images of other people come from a place in our mind called our implicit bias. So what is implicit bias? Implicit bias is defined as the actions and stereotypes that influence our behaviors, decisions, and thoughts subconsciously. These implicit biases start forming at a young and early age, building off of every new piece of information that we acquire. Whether we know it or not, we are constantly collecting and storing data to help us predict, judge, and assess the world around us with new people and new situations. A lot of us here have been lucky enough to live in areas that have exposed us to new people unlike ourselves. We've gone to schools that give us expansive educations and have had a lot of opportunities to talk with other people who come from all different walks of life. Unfortunately, this is not the case everywhere. A lot of people, unfortunately, are isolated in places where they don't get to have those conversations, where they don't get to meet new people, and where they're often surrounded with people like themselves until much later in life. So because of this, their first exposure comes from places like TV, movies, and the internet. This also means that there is a lot of room for skewed information, setting up for a life of perceptions based on misconception. Let me give you an example. Who here liked watching cartoons as a kid? Who here can still remember their favorite characters? There's one show that comes to mind. Who knows Hey Arnold? In that show, I remember he had two friends. Phoebe, who was an incredible student, a spotless academic record, and super smart. His friend Gerald, who was black, but was portrayed as street smart, really cool, and helped his friend navigate through city life. Both of these characters were based off of racial stereotypes about Black and Asian people. And for a lot of people, they can't tell the difference between a TV show and reality. So these stereotypes carry over into real-world situations, and they define real-world groups for the people that experience them firsthand. For a lot of people, this is their first real-world experience with people unlike themselves. So because of that, real-world treatment is put upon real people based off of fake information. By that same principle, for every news story that calls Muslim people terrorists, Mexican immigrants, drug lords, and rapists, more and more people take those words to define those communities. Because of that, we face a lot of real-world problems based off of technological misconceptions. So why do we treat other people this way? Why do we think this way about other people? This comes from a place in our minds that makes us feel comfortable. We all are constantly trying to find ways to make ourselves more comfortable. So the ability to predict, prejudge, and pre-assess the people in our lives, especially the new ones, is something that we all do, whether we know it or not. And because of that, a lot of people have misinformed first impressions of others. So why do we always need to be so comfortable? And it's simple. We like comfort. And our implicit biases help us with that comfort. But of course, it's not right. So implicit bias is something that we need to be aware of, but it's hard to be constantly aware of it. It's like breathing. We don't know we're doing it until someone reminds us, and then we have to be constantly aware of it for it to always be on our minds. But once you are aware of it, shouldn't you fix the problem? If you had a splinter in your hand and you noticed it, would you simply acknowledge it and move on, or would you take a pair of tweezers and pull it out? For us, our pair of tweezers is starting a conversation. Talk to a friend, a teacher, a coworker, a son, a daughter. Talk to them about your implicit biases. Listen to theirs. And through that conversation, you will both be able to learn and grow, being able to hear those different ideas and different perspectives. For me, when I was in first grade, I heard a boy sing Jingle Bells. But after listening for a little bit, I noticed that his rendition of Jingle Bells had changed the lyrics so he could make fun of my name. Based on that experience and a couple of others later in that year and later in elementary school, I started to build up this idea of all white people and how they would all treat me poorly because of my name or because of my race. It took many years and many conversations with good friends and family for me to realize that was not only an isolated incident, but it was wrong of me to force that opinion on all white people because they are individual people, not a group. I'd like to leave you today with a quote by T.S. Eliot. We can at least try to understand our own motives, passions, and prejudices, so as to be conscious of what we are doing when we appeal to those of others. This is very difficult because our own prejudice and emotional bias always seems to us so rational. It seems normal to us to think with these ideas because very often we aren't taught otherwise or told otherwise or aware of them. But now that you are aware of them, please actively fight against them. Work to learn more because there are so many people and you yourself will be better for it. We don't want to be judged first and understood later. We want to be able to define ourselves for the world and not the other way around.